Yeah, the way I try to think through it is technology enables capabilities applied through an operating system to achieve excellence. And a lot of leading companies that are in this space digitally transforming, they miss that operations system, the kind of Toyota production system, Danaher business system element,
Yeah.
where how do these capabilities come together to derive value and then enable that with technology? That's been a key part of our success at many of the operating companies that we have.
Okay, Jennifer, today we've got Tony Huffman, really a special person coming on. People are going to enjoy this one.
I don't know how you couldn't. It's always great conversation with Tony. He's absolutely inspiring at every level of the organization in manufacturing. People should be listening. He has so much wisdom and so much experience and so much clarity in how these things can be done. Everybody should be inspired. I am.
We talk about leaders that are struggling to get with this new phase of transformation. He mentions at one point leaders he met that couldn't spell MES even if you gave them the E. And there's too many leaders who either just about technology and not about people, or maybe they were a good people leader, but they're like, I'm gonna retire before I even think about this new crazy AI. And he's one of those leaders that he knows. He goes so deep on data fabric, unified namespace, AI. He knows everything about it, and he is completely people first.
Absolutely agree. And I think the way when you say he's people first, he knows how to operationalize that. He thinks about, like you said, these deep technological advancements and where they apply. And he talks about this in the episode and how important it is to get that operational and make sure that you get buy-in from your people. They know how this is going to affect them. He said, getting that around that.
Exactly. It was like when we asked him to go to an example, he picked a plant in Molex, and we were like, which one were you most proud of? And he talked about how they kind of had to go a step back or 2 steps back to go 3 steps forward, which we all know and like, but he didn't jump to his favorite technology project. And it was so good because it had people, process, and technology transformation. So anyways, he's an amazing example, and this episode has so much breadth to it.
I say let's get into it. Let's
do it.
Let's go for it.
Okay, we are thrilled to have Tony Huffman with us today, a true visionary in the world of digital transformation. Over the past 20 years, Tony's been driving changes across industries like electronics, automotive, aerospace, medical devices. His expertise spans critical areas like starting in the data transformations, the unified namespace, industrial data fabric. His experience with MES, MOM, and ERP systems, and AI-driven innovation, connected workforce. It's going to be a pleasure talking with him. He's a leader now of enterprise architecture strategy for Industry 4.0 at Koch Industries, where he's played a pivotal role in establishing cutting-edge smart manufacturing, operational excellence, and digital supply chain capabilities. In today's conversation, we're going to explore key topics across this range of smart manufacturing, including unified namespace, industrial data fabric, AI-driven decision engines, and the evolving role of the MES. We'll also discuss strategies for measuring value beyond traditional ROI, approaches to driving transformation in regulated industries, and the critical role of trust, compliance, and people-first change management in successful digital transformation. Tony, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andrew. Always enjoy opportunities to share and seek the best knowledge that's out there. It's a moving industry, a lot of crazy stuff happening, very impactful, disruptive, and we try to do our best to stay ahead as much as we can.
Absolutely. Jennifer and I have so many questions for you, but before we dive into your extensive knowledge, I wanted to go to your career just a bit. You've been across so many fascinating companies, and tell us a little bit about you as a person, kind of how you got started and what's been the arc that's now led you to this role at Koch.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting career. So I started in industrial manufacturing engineering about 2 decades ago, worked for a company that was very well known in the lean community as one of the best lean operations. We, at the time, had won some Shingo Prize awards for best plant, Industry Week recognized for best plant. We partnered with Shingenjutsu Consulting. It's a very formalized approach to lean continuous improvement led by former executives at Toyota. So we did a lot around Kaizen, continuous improvement, lean, and I really got a good sense for how do you transform an operation using people, process, and some technology. We were implementing, new scanning technologies, some MES shop floor systems, but it was really focused on the people and process side of the equation. And I took that and went into the med device industry where they were pretty far behind. It was interesting when you come from a very lean operation to med device. It's kind of eye opening to say, wow, there's much more to be done here. And I think that has to do with the regulatory environment and having to do things like validation activities before you can make some significant changes. So learn how to apply those same concepts in a very regulated environment. Then went into aerospace and defense, and it was very similar where we had a lot of controls. We had better practices, but there was a need for those lean operations. I spent a lot of time early in my career in industrial manufacturing engineering, quality operations, and lean operational excellence type capabilities. So along the journey, got certified in Six Sigma, which helps from a problem solving perspective. Did a lot of activity in various operations across the world, learning a lot of cultural differences and how to apply these, a lot of different industries and regulatory requirements that come with those. So got a good breadth of knowledge, and then came to Koch about 10 years ago, really to focus on how do we evolve from Lean Six Sigma to operational excellence and digital transformation. So I was able to take all that underpinning foundational work and then apply technology in a way to help accelerate, enrich, and sustain some of those gains that you see with Lean and Six Sigma. So I still go back to those roots when I look at problem solving and innovation, and look at now how does technology with AI and intelligence augment what we were working at in the past with Excel spreadsheets and stopwatches and cardboard cutouts. We can now do it virtually with digital twins and more advanced analytics.
I love that arc of ops excellence. So you emphasized even in the beginning, you like not that much technology.
Right,
and,
exactly.
and then through the regulated industries where you had to step back a bit and do change management differently. And now you're clearly heavily involved with technology, but it sounds like you've got that rooted in that Lean Six Sigma and the evolution of it.
Yeah,
Some people, I've heard people use the word like digital lean or digital Six Sigma, which isn't said too much, but it just kind of reminds that it's the same idea evolving.
yeah. The way I try to think through it is technology enables capabilities applied through an operating system to achieve excellence. And a lot of leading companies that are in this space, digitally transforming, they miss that operations system, the kind of Toyota production system, Danaher business system element,
Yeah.
where how do these capabilities come together to derive value and then enable that with technology? That's been a key part of our success at many of the operating companies that we have.
Yeah, that's actually going to lead into the next question I had when you were talking about how are we using the technology to drive intelligence. I've heard you and I have talked about this several times in the past, and you've talked a lot about, driving that operational excellence. A big part of that revolves around a lot of the frameworks that you talk about a lot, unified namespace, industrial data fabric, talk about that, which, to be fair, I mean, I lead a communications and marketing team at my company. So of course I'm always from the advocating for let's be clear about what those mean, right? Why don't you help us break down a little bit help us break down some of those terms and what they mean when you say unified namespace, the industrial data fabric. Like, what is that?
Sure.
Start there.
Let me describe the architecture at a very high level. You're intending to connect assets, get information from sensors, machines, equipment, and then contextualize that and have some consistency as you roll it across a multitude of companies, even within one plant, different departments. So there's a lot of inconsistencies in the data, the nomenclature, and how that data is leveraged near real time or real time requires some type of investment into a unified namespace. So unified namespace is really a concept of how do I get some consistency in the hierarchy of plant to equipment to tools to sensors. You want to be able to frame it up so that as you go to deploy new analytics or new intelligence, you're consistent and you can scale those wins. The challenge with most companies is they'll do it on a proof of value or proof of concept and then struggle to scale. They can't get the consistency needed to roll it out globally. And so we spent a lot of time at Molex on that connected assets front. The second piece is connected platform. So that's your MES, your ERP, EAM, your alphabet soup, if you will, all these platforms that are transactional in nature and that are capturing data beyond just the assets. They're getting material, people, all the equipment, all the inputs and outputs in the value chain of information. That unified namespace can then be applied there to start connecting the dots between the asset information and that transactional information. So that's giving you the ability to scale and to start contextualizing to a higher degree, which is what analytics needs. Analytics needs that information so that it can become predictive and prescriptive. And then ultimately, the third piece of it is connected worker. So in the future, connected workers, they shouldn't have to go into these subsystems, the MES, the ERPs, and all the connected asset information. They should be able to single pane of glass feed all that information into a personified view, and then augmenting that with intelligence is really where we're trying to get to next in this connected worker space. So that unified namespace is how you're aggregating, how you're contextualizing, and being able to scale all of that information to unlock connected workers. So it's one piece of the equation. It's not the entire equation, but it's something that we've invested pretty heavily in. That all coming together is what we call the industrial data fabric. So hopefully that helps clarify.
Okay. Okay. So industrial data fabric is your, you said kind of assets first, and then transactional systems, and then connected worker experience by persona. I love where you ended that too, because that was, as you were starting talking, you were one of these people that crosses both sides of that IT/OT. I was thinking about all of these calls, whether it's Manufacturing Leadership Council or SESME or MESA or whatever it is, right? Where an IT person will usually say, if it doesn't scale, we got a problem. And an OT person will say, if we don't start with the use case, we have a problem.
Yeah, sure.
So you just described kind of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Both correct. Yeah. You just described the whole thing in the data fabric. I guess go to the use case, because there are some use cases, this thing enables 100 use cases, and there are some use cases that don't really become powerful until they have the assets and the transactional system context. But what are some of the use cases that become valuable early on, and in your experience, kind of best justify the ongoing build out of the framework?
Yeah, it is a crawl, walk, then run approach, and it takes time to build that consistency, the unified namespace, the intelligence that you're trying to unlock. But once you get there, the use cases that we find are pretty powerful are, think of a maintenance technician. Their role is quite complicated, where they have to troubleshoot, diagnose, they do a lot of maintenance activity. They have to go into a multitude of systems and pull all sorts of records and history to be able to figure out what the root cause is, what to do about it, and how to get back to a normal state, move from abnormal to normal. And the use cases that we find valuable is, how do we personify an application, an experience where you have the information you need from all of those subsystems presented in a manner that's built for your persona. So they've got analytics, they've got access to their maintenance work orders and can read and write information. They may even have a 3D rendering or AR type experience, augmented reality experience, where they can walk around the facility and say, hey, here's a pump and here's the information I need. And they have everything that is going to be required to troubleshoot. The really transformation piece of it is, that's where we apply GenAI and AI capability to augment that individual, especially with the workforce of the future. We're seeing, people coming and going a lot more frequent. The average tenure moving from decades to a few months in some cases, that we're asking people to troubleshoot very complicated experiences and problems. That's where the augmentation comes in. We're able to capture that intelligence and then feed it on top of those applications that we're building. That's kind of the new experience that we're trying to unlock across our operating companies, and really getting better decisions faster, and then being able to make their process more seamless, efficient, timely. That's the outcomes that we're looking for.
Yeah, I'll just throw some in here. I love that example of maintenance, as you said. And it's so good we're at this level of personalization. And I was just thinking about an example here. If, my mic right in the middle here is not working and the volume is not coming through. Okay, I know that there's a dial and, I need to make sure the volume's up. But something else is happening here. So I've taken a picture of it and I put that into my phone already. And the AI said, can you give me a bit more information on this? So let me do that, which I could do talking in any language here. So, hey, AI, so I just gave you the picture of this microphone. And yes, I have confirmed that the volume is up. But what else could be wrong that you could help me troubleshoot here? I'm not an expert at this.
Let's troubleshoot step by step with simple checks to figure out what might be wrong. Step 1, check microphone connection. Confirm the microphone is properly connected to the computer. If it's a USB mic, make sure the cable is securely plugged into the mic and the computer. Step 2, check audio input settings on the computer. Go to your computer's audio settings on Windows, Settings, Sound, Input Devices, and ensure the microphone is selected. On Mac, System Preferences, Sound Input tab, and select the mic.
And if you've literally never done this before, I could next say I'm specifically using Zoom and this computer, and it'll tell me exactly what to do. Man, cool stuff.
It's phenomenal. Yeah, it's amazing.
But I'm curious if you do this at all, Tony, but I'm a power user of ChatGPT and the different AIs like in my own life. And one thing when I was growing up, I don't know about you, but I had a dad, he's an aerospace engineer, rocket scientist, and he was just handy at, he could fix anything.
Sure.
And my mom would be like, go with him into the garage, Andrew, follow him as he fixes the dishwasher. And he wouldn't say anything. I love my dad, but he would just be quiet because he needed to focus. And I would say, Dad, what are you doing? Like, no answer. Like, why'd you put that wire there? No answer, right? And I didn't have some cool like AR thing to like capture him as he was doing it. And I am now so handy. I fix the dishwasher. I do the electrical and I fix all my kids' toys. Because when I don't know, I snap a picture of it and I ask for advice. And then I'm like, I'm so more confident now. And it's like, I was just reflecting on it the other day. I was like, I've reached the handiness of my dad, but in a totally different way.
Yeah, for sure. And it's using technology. And that's what we see is the big disruption.
We're going to bring AI in here. So, hey, ChatGPT. So I was just telling Tony how I've finally reached the level of handiness as my dad, but in a totally different way by using you to fix the dishwasher. So we were just doing this the other day and we were in front of the dishwasher. I was able to take a picture. You gave me all the classic reasons, but the first, second, third reason didn't fix it. We had to go deeper. And so then I did ask my dad, what do you think? And he looks under the kitchen sink and he sees that the disposal and the dishwasher are connected in a weird way at the top for him, but he didn't know why. And then I took a picture of what was the air gap, and you explained that it was a California regulation. My dad thought it was like wrongly configured. We ended up cleaning that, and then that worked. Why was it that when an expert asked a question, we got to different feedback for you? And I guess, how do you think about novices and experts using AI together?
That's such a great story. And it really highlights how AI can support people at different levels of expertise. Here's how I see it. Novices and experts use AI differently because their questions and context are shaped by their experiences. For novices, AI often becomes a guide, helping them identify basic troubleshooting steps or explaining concepts they might not know. It's a bit like a checklist approach, starting with the most common issues and working deeper. For experts like your dad, the value often lies in confirmation or refinement. They know how things should work, so their questions are more targeted.
That's exactly what it was. It was like a faster checklist just to get into it. My dad would have stopped. He wouldn't have changed that air gap because he thought someone designed this. It told us, nope, it's there for a reason, but you're right. It's a failure point, and together we fixed it. So it really is a technology for kind of experts and beginners together.
Yeah, and you think about applying that into the factory floor, and if you could put that in there today, think about the upskilling and the speed and the accuracy, just how much faster it takes things. It's exciting.
Okay, Tony, back to you.
Connected worker's been out there for a long time. And initially it was a smart device, some type of wearable, mobility, or digital work instructions. You've got information where you need it. With augmentation, GenAI, agentic AI, we're seeing that be the big disruption, and that's the unlock for these new employees that don't have the years of experience and the know-how. They can get that augmentation just like you would from a YouTube video that you're referencing at home. If you're trying to fix something, it's going to be a very similar experience in our factories as we move forward.
Yeah, so it's interesting as I'm observing this, I'm thinking about some of the conversations we've had recently with customers and with other colleagues, and how important it is to be able to prove ROI early as you're adopting new technologies. They have to be able to demonstrate value, right? But it's tricky because you and I've had this conversation a few times before about exploring how sometimes the traditional ROI metrics fall short when you're looking at
Mhm.
digital transformation. I suspect that's probably related to the run, improve, transform methodology, and we can talk more about that later. But walk us through that a little bit. If some of the ROI, if ROI isn't necessarily the best way to measure the success of it, how do they think about value in transformation projects then? So and I guess my other question would be, do you have specific examples, non-financial metrics that leaders should be paying closer attention to?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's a challenge that a lot of companies face is, and I'll jump ahead a little bit, but the ability to balance running the business, improving the business, and transforming the business is difficult. You have a lot of leaders that their incentives have been baked and geared around running and improving. So you've got some type of use case, you have an ROI, you've got some type of metric or KPI that you're trying to improve incrementally, and you kind of know the path forward. When it comes to transformation, it's more unknown. You've got to innovate, experiment. We follow what's called the new two model, which is this new to Molex? Is it new to Koch? New to industry? New to world? And when we start something that is more transformation in nature, we know that this is going to be new to Coke or potentially new to industry. And we need to figure out, how does this apply in our environment? How do we really think about ways of working differently? And when we talk about measures for transformation, it's more than just the financials. It's, how are we improving employee experience? Given workforce of the future is going to have different expectations, if not they have different expectations today. We need to really understand that level of engagement and augmentation intelligence that we're delivering. The second is capability maturity. All of our competition are after this same digital transformation effort. We need to stay competitive. We need to, in many cases, be able to provide a better experience and value proposition than the folks right across the street that we're competing with. Because that's the reality, is everybody's investing in this space, so we need to stay ahead of the curve. The third is our operational KPIs. So we spent a lot of time at Molex in particular standardizing on KPIs, trying to get some consistency across the plants. Again, leveraging the unified namespace and that industrial data fabric to automate. But we wanted to have some consistency so that we can show the transformational step change. It shouldn't just be incremental. It should be a step change when we do implement some of these more advanced capabilities. Then we look at financials. You can't ignore the ROI. You can't ignore the financials, but just being able to only focus on that kind of hinders our ability to innovate and experiment, think long term. Coke, fortunately, is a privately held company. So when we talk long term, it's many years instead of just quarter by quarter. So we're able to make bigger bets and really look at, how does this transform an organization over time. But in those bets, we do have financials, we do have measures that we need to focus on. The challenge there is when we have executives that say, all right, tell me the value of this technology. When I get that challenge or feedback, I always go back to that same model: technology enabling capabilities applied through an operating system to achieve excellence. The value is in the operating system. The value is in how these capabilities come together in concert to derive a better outcome in those financials. It's not just the technology. And so when I look at financials, it's about, what is the operating system delivering? How do we see that step change in performance and metrics that are consistent? And we'll measure that on a regular basis, day to day, down on the shop floor, cascaded up into a monthly operating report for some of the senior leaders. And then the last is this helping us from a growth perspective? Are we coming up with new products and services? Are we winning more business? Are we getting better value propositions from the products and services that we're delivering that our customers are paying more for? And you're seeing the top line growth. So we kind of look at transformation a little bit different. We've had senior executive leaders say, if you're just looking at financials, you've already failed your transformation. So I would just stop there. So we try to create a bigger scope of what are we actually impacting and how is this going to help us in the long term from a step change in performance and ways of working. We're radically going to change the way that we operate, not just an incremental improvement.
I wanted to just throw one thing in. That was an awesome description of kind of KPIs across the board. I want to get your hot take on kind of global versus local KPIs and like
Mhm.
focusing on individual plants. They're in the automotive industry. There's some companies that have this philosophy called lags, locally accountable global support. And then more of them
Yeah.
were starting to say, okay, lags is making us lag behind. And so then they want to get at least a little more centralized. But obviously, you can go wrong on both sides. You can let your plants just
Sure.
completely do their own thing, or you can only focus on your global, rollout metric. And so I guess, do you have any just hot take of like where is the balance and where are the best companies going in how much they're measuring locally versus globally?
Yeah, it's a great question and a great challenge. And the answer is it depends. And it ebbs and flows. Sometimes you'll centralize and then decentralize and come back. What I've seen work well, you have localized metrics, KPIs within a facility, drilled down from cell to area to site, and then tied to some type of overarching strategy initiatives, kind of your strategy execution piece linked to that. That can be difficult because you're trying to stretch the organization, but then within the operations, you need to manage the day by day. The cascading of those metrics and how you work together from a global corporate perspective down into the divisions, into the sites, can be difficult. It's hard to get the connective thread in between, especially if things are manual. If you're managing that via PowerPoints and Excel spreadsheets, it becomes very, very difficult to just show the linkage, especially when you talk, how does that link to activity? What projects and initiatives at the higher level are really driving the needle and step change performance in those localized KPIs and operations? If you're trying to do that with Excel and PowerPoint, it becomes a big challenge. For
Totally.
us, we centralize where it makes sense at a kind of corporate or enterprise level that we don't want each operating facility to have to make investments in. And that's things like AI or other technologies that it doesn't make sense for that localized team to have to spend and invest the same amount of effort when we can do it globally. I own at Koch a few centers of excellence on things like spatial technologies and some other things that we have recognized. It makes more sense to have a central team that can follow a framework where we have the central team innovate and experiment and then hand off to product owners within the companies to take it from there. So it depends, and it's going to ebb and flow. New technologies are going to come in. Don't necessarily want sites to be innovating on the next emerging tech if you can come up with a good effective center of excellence model.
So it's interesting as you're talking about that. It makes me wonder. You and I had a conversation earlier this year when we were talking about different industries and the rates at which they are transforming. And I mean, to be fair, some have more wiggle room than others, right? It's just
Mhm.
reality. You have a lot of experience in regulated, so I want to go back to that for a second. Like, for example, do you see innovation? I don't think we do see innovation progressing equally across the sectors. Which ones do you see driving it faster than others? And I guess one of the questions for me particularly is, how do you see compliance and regulation impacting either the ability or the impetus to transform?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I do see leaders and laggards across industries. What's interesting is you take a med device company, they've got a lot of regulation. Some of it is rooted in FDA, QSR from, many decades ago, many years ago. And their ability to manage risk is going to look a little bit different. They may be more conservative when it comes to investment, but what they are doing well is as they stand up greenfield, they're applying these technologies and capabilities with the lens of we want to design out error, design for quality, design for manufacturability. So they do a lot of effort in their greenfield facilities to kind of become a leading company from ground up, doing digital twin, and you see that in some of the WEF lighthouse sites. A lot of them are med device because they're making those investments, kind of preemptively, avoiding the situation where they have to retrofit and do a lot of validation activity. The other thing about the med device industry is the FDA's been partnering with a lot of companies to come up with a kind of case for quality, and they recognize the importance of some of these fundamental foundational systems, like I talked through in that industrial data fabric, and they're in some cases allowing organizations to use that as a mechanism to control and manage versus the historic, SOPs, procedures, work instructions. They're opening up the idea to technology can help control. Technology can help us ensure quality and efficacy of our product. So you see some innovation in med device, but if you go into a brownfield site in med device, you're going to find some lagging processes or things that haven't innovated as much as some of the other industries. When I look at where are the furthest industries, oil and gas is doing some great stuff around connected worker and that experience, and really that true application of Gen AI and AI for those employees. That's been exciting to see, and we play a role in that. We have some of those operations and have made significant investments in that space. So yeah, by industry, you see kind of a mix. Everybody's going towards it. I think if you're fortunate enough to have a greenfield operation, a new site stand up, now's the time to take the best of the best. Don't just replicate what you had done in the past. And we've done that across Koch with some of our new facilities being fully autonomous, getting to kind of lights out manufacturing as close as we can, as close as possible.
Yeah, it's absolutely true.
Opportunities too. I see that in your role, the power of learning from different industries and transferring them too. Tony, I wanted to ask if you could tell us a story or two. And I'm curious, you've been part of so many transformation projects. I wanted to prompt you to pick maybe a story, whether it had the biggest results or not for the organization that you were like the most proud of. And then if it made sense, maybe the opposite, like maybe it was almost obvious to you, but it was totally game changing to the org once you got it through. Like, what are some of the transformation projects that stand out from your history?
Yeah, I'll talk about our approach to transformation and Molex. In particular, there's a facility, go unnamed, but the people from Molex maybe listening will know, or if they do listen. So there's a facility, it's very large. It's what we call a solutions plant. So it's discrete operation, very complicated, small lot size, a lot of complexity, serving almost every industry. So med device and aerospace and automotive. And at the time, they were struggling. We brought in a lot of new products and programs, and the team was stretched pretty thin. There was several strategic initiatives on their plate, over 30, being led by the same small team, and not a lot of momentum and movement on those initiatives to where we needed to be. So there were some gaps, and they were trying to get into the tier one automotive space, which opened up even more gaps because there's a lot of customer requirements and new regulatory things that they needed to consider and implement. So I spent alongside the operational excellence team about a year going back and forth to help them in their journey towards tier one automotive and towards transformation, both digitally and operationally. What we did to start with is look at all the strategic initiatives and say, all right, well, how do we build a framework to help improve this? And we quickly realized that's not where we need to start. We need to start with how we run the business. So going back to every business needs to balance, run, improve, and transform. We then started with run the business. How do you establish lean daily management practices, the Kaizen events, the value stream, the optimization to get to a level of stability and some level of standardization that we could then innovate on top of. And what that did is it allowed the leaders to get out of the whirlwind, to stop firefighting, to be able to work on what's next, because we call it principled operations. A lot of the teams down on the floor were able to solve problems. They had decision rights. They were able to keep things moving. If it became abnormal, they had paths and mechanisms to get it back to normal without having to pull in senior leaders. And so we started there, and that was a big effort. It took a long time to get that designed, scaled, and put in place across the entire facility. Once we had that, then it's all right, how do we use technology? Now we have some consistent practices. We were just using whiteboards at the time with markers, and it was very manual to keep things running and moving. We then implemented technologies to kind of underpin that and say, how do we automate some of this stuff? Now they have the work practices. How do we make that more efficient, effective, and then giving them more insights to problem solve better and quicker and faster?
Got to be willing to go back to go forward sometimes.
Exactly. So you gotta start there, and then apply the technology. We then implemented some new platforms to help them control the process, things like a manufacturing execution system, so that
Mm.
it's sticking. So you implement the lean daily management, and the challenge is if it's too manual, if it's human dependent, you're gonna see a slip back as leaders change, as people come and go. And so the technology comes in there and it helps from a sustaining perspective. So they've implemented some new platforms, and then they started getting into higher levels of intelligence with that data, started getting the connective tissue or that industrial data fabric between those systems. And at the time, they were going through these audit processes and had a lot of challenges. We were able to see all of those start dwindling away, and the activities to move from abnormal to normal being pushed down lower in the organization. You could visually see where teams were ahead or behind and what they were doing about it and how the flow was impeded and how they can get back to a normal state. That was pretty impactful, pretty exciting. That they continue that journey. They're now looking at higher levels of capability. And it went from one of the worst performing sites to one of the best performing. And they keep getting new volume and keep expanding. I think they're on the third expansion there just because of the hard work that they did to really get that transformation in place. It was not easy though. And there were challenges from OCM leadership and expectation management, and then just the brute force of getting all of that in place. It was not easy, but it was a good lighthouse for us that we then brought people in to say, this is what good looks like. Let's go back and figure out where you're at in that journey and help you move along. But that's a good story. There's a lot more I could go through. I mean, we touched 30 manufacturing plants in pretty much every region. So
That story was great. Maybe just touch the personal side of it again, I guess.
yeah,
Like,
sure.
so it went from the worst plant to the best plant. It was a lighthouse. But like, why else? What's, I guess, just in a sentence, like, why else did you pick that story? Why was it meaningful?
Yeah, I think because they were able to really demonstrate the change in people, process, and technology. So at the time we started, it was kind of chaotic. There was a site leader who brought us up on the mezzanine, and you could oversee many of the operations across the factory. And it was chaos. It was people running around doing things, and the site leader at the time said, "Look at all this work. This is great. Look at all these people super busy." And I'm like, "No, this is not great." So it was a change in just mindset with a lot of that lead team of it should be self-functioning. You should be able to stand on that mezzanine, see where things are ahead or behind and who's working on what, and to be able to see them go through that journey. Some people couldn't make that leap and had to be either repositioned or removed. But
Yeah.
once we had that lead team that was really in that new mindset and driving it, then the technology is the easy part, to be honest with you. It's that mental shift, that mindset that's needed. That back to my previous career and different roles that I had around Lean and Six Sigma and operational excellence and managing ops system, that's needing to kind of be that foundational layer before they applied any technology. And so that was kind of the message that we helped drive to the other parts of the organization that just wanted the tech and said, we already do that. Well, do you do that? And here's what good looks like. And oh, there are gaps, and how do we close those?
And I bet they couldn't really argue against that after that. You did people, process, and technology. You took them the whole journey. So
Right.
there were
Exactly.
no more excuses, probably just inspirations.
Exactly. And that's, been part of the success. And as I look at the other operating companies in my new role, I'm responsible for helping accelerate transformation across all the co-companies. We take that same framework and model and say, all right, you've got some foundational work to be had before we come in with technology.
I think what I'm hearing from that is, not overlooking the element of leadership and the belief that it can happen, and then vision and executing. But I think it does come down to leadership on this. I think that it's interesting because we were talking, or I'd heard you at one point talking about how surprisingly not resistant some of these organizations are to wanting some of this change. I mean, you've heard for years how real change management is and how difficult sometimes the politics become tricky. That's reality. That's true. And yet we are finding also how much appetite there is for change and how much buy-in there is for change. And I think that is inextricably linked to vision and leadership and executing it. So I kind of want to talk about that a little bit. Like,
Yep.
as you're advising some of these companies, as you're going in and you're starting this, are there frameworks or methodologies that you think are particularly effective? What did you lean on?
Yeah. So organizational change management is a huge piece of this. And we at Molex in particular spent a lot of time investing in that space. We set up a team and they had frameworks, methodologies, all of which we tailored into our management philosophy, so it wasn't too far off. But there's a lot of good ones out there. AgCar model, and use something. But anything is better than nothing. When I think of organizational change management, though, it's a little bit different than what most people think. Most people, when they think change management, they go down to the shop floor and the end users of said technology or process improvement, and they try to get people to adopt things. That is a piece of it. But to me, that's actually the easiest piece. And there's a lot of pain that many of our operators and support functions deal with on a day-to-day basis. They want easier ways of working. They want better tools, better insights. They want it ubiquitous to how they operate. And that's the challenge of the teams, is to design it so that it's just part of their process. It's not something new and different and a distraction. But that's fairly easy. You can figure that out and design it. There are other OCM challenges at the middle leadership layer and the top layer. Those are more difficult. We actually had a term at one point that middle layer was the hardest, and we called it the frozen middle, just because we would go into an organization, maybe a facility, and we would talk to them about transformation, how things needed to flow in the process. It's a commitment from the leadership team. And everybody said, yeah, we're good. We leave, come back, no progress. They kind of get stuck in their ways of working. That leadership standard work is very difficult for people. So it's interesting because most of those individuals, they tout standard work for the shop floor and discipline and consistency, problem solving, all this. But then when they look at their own selves in that leadership team, they maybe are missing some of that. And they're not as open to change the ways of their working and change the ways that they interface with the system that we're establishing. And so we spent a lot of time coaching and kind of changing that lens on how do you do your daily management as a supervisor? What are the activities that you need to be doing to help enable the shop floor, to help enable this transformation effort? And then at the executive level, it's difficult because, we had a joke internally that our executive team couldn't spell MES if we gave them the E. It was a lot of education. Like, what is this? Why are we doing this? What's the investment? What's the return? Who's done this? Why do I need this? I've already spent a bunch of money on an ERP system and deployment. So it's a lot of education, a lot of benchmarking, a lot of, let's take these folks out of the carpeted environments, bring them to the concrete and see what pains are and what we need to do. And then go into leading lighthouse organizations. And we spent a lot of time with some companies to see what good looks like and to show them, hey, this is what we could be doing and how more efficient and effective it is. And then highlighting those pain points that they saw in the factories. And we do this in Excel and PowerPoint and all. What I say is you have to hit all three layers, and they all have to have a shared vision. There's one thing to share a vision. There's another to establish a shared vision. Like you have to get them all thinking the same way and supporting. They're going to need to make investments at the high level. The leaders are needing to change the way they work and engage. And then the shop floors, you got to be a big ubiquitous so they adopt and adapt to those new environments. All that is part of OCM. And luckily, we had a really strong team to do that.
Totally agreed. So it's interesting as you're talking about that. I think that, when you're talking about, you're going to have it at all three layers. You're going to have it at all three levels. You're going to have to be able to articulate clearly, get that established vision.
Mhm.
There's no doubt that is absolutely the truth. I'm just going to say, I'm going to share something I know personally about Tony, one of the first times we met, he shared that, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, that he is a screenwriter.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Tony is a prolific storyteller. Absolutely. And I think that
Storytelling
that's
is important.
absolutely. I think that lends to your strength in being able to drive vision at a leadership level. That's really important. I think people need to be able to see, what's the before and after look like? How does my
Yep.
day-to-day change? What is this going to look like? What's it going to look like in the future? So I actually want to talk to you about that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
And we might want to, I mean, this might be a good place for us to play and have fun and make a bunch of assumptions on what we think AI is going to change and how things are going to look
Okay. Sure.
I think if anybody was guessing what AI would look like in 10 years, they'd be wildly wrong by at least 9 years.
Yes.
So I think that, but if we wanted to guess, you're trying to set your organization up for change. We talked about this before. Improving your organization is not transforming your organization. They're not.
Mm.
They're not always the same. And
Yep.
so if you're trying to look at articulating what that change looks like for each of those personas, let's talk about that a little bit. Give me some examples of what you think AI, how it makes it look at the different personas, how it is now, how it's going to be.
Yeah. If you start with kind of the shop floor, the folks orchestrating activity in the future, like I described, they'll all be connected. In a sense, put all this information that's disparate, that's located in SharePoint sites and PowerPoint decks and all these subsystems, and make it personified like you would use your apps at your local school activity. You got everything that you need. What I think AI brings to that is you're augmenting people's intelligence by capturing the structured, semi-structured, unstructured, and tacit knowledge of all that workforce as much as you can. It's ingesting that, and then through AI capabilities, having a chat like feature where you can talk to it. That's at the shop floor. So you're going to be able to see people have the information they need at their fingertips, augmented with some type of intelligence. And they don't need to go to Frank or Sally that have been here 30 years. They've got that knowledge in their palm of their hand or some type of wearable. That's where we're headed, and we're making big strides in that space. A lot of companies are investing pretty heavily there. The other two layers, so intelligence for middle management, is really going to be, how do I manage by exception and find ways to create value that I won't be able to gather just by pulling information and records. AI is going to be able to know a lot more based on all that information you're unlocking, and it will point those people into what investments they need to make, capital, resources, what designs from a optimized layout and being able to streamline operations are most efficient and optimal. So think of digital twin, digital thread of information that gives them exactly how to move things. They'll go through thousands of iterations virtually, and then the AI engine says this is what to do and how to do it. Now, those middle layers, they have a lot of expertise and knowledge that'll be captured in those same engines for the folks on the floor. And so their role kind of changes to be there to coach and to make sure the experience is great and to optimize to a higher level degree. Not so much the firefighting and troubleshooting and problem solving. That's all going to be captured virtually via AI. That may mean you have different types of leaders. So some of our leaders, they're incentivized and kind of their core competencies are problem solving and troubleshooting and fixing things. In the future, we kind of want to back away from that and really focus on the individual. Like, what's the experience? What's the coaching? What can they do to optimize everything at a higher level or strategic? And AI is going to help with that. The top layer is really, how do they see the growth of the company? How can they truly transform? So think of it as another. I'd like to think through things as hierarchies. The lowest level is smart assets. The second level is smart factory, the orchestration. That's where the supervisors are going to create more intelligence. The assets is really the people on the floor. They're going to be augmented and be able to run those assets, those processes much more efficiently. The next layer up is Industry 4.0 across supply chain, product development, manufacturing. The intelligence that can be unlocked there is for the senior leaders to say, what new products and services should we acquire? What can we do to evolve those products and services, create more revenue stream, and then start getting into this connected product vision. So they're able to unlock more things as you go up that food chain based on the intelligence that you're kind of building ground up. So AI is going to be a huge impact. We're just scratching the surface on what it's going to do and how it's going to improve. Over time, it'll get to a point with this agentic AI conversation that you'll see a lot of roles and tasks be eliminated. Doesn't mean the people will be eliminated, but the roles and tasks of repetitive things are going to start getting automated, which should free people up to work on more valuable activity.
Tony, before we go to the rapid fire questions and close out here, I wanted to get your take on some current news. In our industry, where usually there's not much controversy, Walker Reynolds dropping some F-bombs and challenging to take out people's career over the question of MES. And if people didn't see it, he dropped a spicy video saying that the big question is, do you build your MES or buy your MES? And he was on build. And if anyone disagrees, I'll threaten your I'll destroy your career because I'm so confident. And among others, Francisco Lobo, CEO of Critical Manufacturing, currently in the MES, came in with a very diplomatic answer. Well, you can buy our MES and build with our MES,
Yeah.
But I guess do you have any take on that interesting debate? And then is that even the right debate with like all that's happening in AI? Is it connected or not? Or like, how did you see that?
Yeah, I mean, this is my point of view. And not to slight anybody out there, Mark is a great guy. Everybody's super intelligent in their field of expertise. My point of view is there will be a disruption in the industrial software space. So think about, there's a lot of investment in things like low code, no code applications, building tools that you can click and drag and drop widgets and be able to do things. Over time, the coding languages of C and Java and all these coding languages will evolve to English. And we're seeing some of that. I mean, internally, you can build apps using cloud or ChatGPT in React. You just talk to it and it'll build the app for you. So that's the disruption that's going to happen in this industry and space. When you talk build versus buy, well, that opens up more opportunities. The reason you would want to buy is because you don't have the knowledge and expertise to become a software company. You don't have the coding languages, the architecture, the better practices, all that. But if it becomes more mainstream and you can actually get to a point where your developers can develop in any language and do any type of application development, there will be disruption there. Now, MES is unique because it has some core functionalities that it's difficult to be able to build all that knowledge base on your own versus buying something that's 80% there and then configuring or customizing it the other 20%. It still is a little bit of an easier lift in my experience than starting from scratch. But there are a lot of small to mid-sized businesses that can now go down that path because development in itself has become more commoditized, and you can look at these various tools and be able to do some more innovative stuff. It depends on the business and your thirst for an appetite to learn that knowledge and to be able to embed it into your organization versus having the investment into an MES that's more out of the box.
Very good. I like the take, and we'll follow back up with you on it because I remember earlier you talked about how in your central team, you were guiding things like spatial intelligence and AI that you really saw a central investment was good. So it sounds like MES, you see central investment good, but you see the landscape shifting too as it's so much easier to code in English. So that was awesome. Let's move into the rapid fire questions. All right, Tony. So we got just a couple quick questions for you. Give us your quick, 20, 30-second take on these. So first, is there a book, movie, or TV series that inspires you when thinking about the future of manufacturing?
Yeah, so the book Designed for Operational Excellence is one I reference quite a bit. That is really geared around lean operational excellence. But if you do that right, technology fits right on top, and that's transformational. There's another book called Homo Deus that talks about the future and where that's going. That's more broad in perspective. That one I would recommend as well.
Very cool. All right. Picked up some new ideas. What leader or innovator in technology or engineering do you admire the most, and why?
For me, I'm sure Elon Musk has a lot of positives, but he's got kind of an approach that I wouldn't necessarily recommend. But a leader like, I don't know if you guys know Larry Culp at GE Aerospace. He came from Danaher. He's doing some amazing stuff, and he really understands this kind of framework that I'm describing to a T, and you can see the performance of the companies he goes and leads, and how he thinks about transformation. Somebody like that is a good person to follow.
Tony, what piece of technology totally outside of manufacturing has had the most impact on your life, and how do you reflect on that?
I would say ChatGPT, the kind of GenAI capability, has helped me quite a bit. It continues to evolve, and I continue to find ways to apply it. Like you said, it's going to be disruptive. We're just scratching the surface, and I can see where it's headed. That's what I'm most interested in and have really dug the most into over the past year or so.
Well, maybe this will answer that, but I don't think it does. If you could instantly acquire any new skill or knowledge area, what would it be?
Yeah, if you asked me that a few years ago, I'd say coding, but you just saw Jensen Huang from NVIDIA say, if you're working on coding, you're wasting your time. So I'd say that's probably not what I would be focused on right now. For me, I want to learn more about the architecture that leading organizations are building up towards to help unlock these AI capabilities at scale. That architecture is evolving. There's a lot around agentic AI that I don't know enough about. Things like lane graph and semantic kernel and all these things. I need to know more about that, because that's really the next phase. 2024 was all about Gen AI. 2025 is going to be about agentic AI. And I'm going to try my best to stay on top of that knowledge. We have a team of people that are really good, so I'm learning as much as I can.
Yeah. Well, it's evolving quickly.
It is. Yeah.
And Tony, there's a lot of people that really admire your career and are earlier in theirs. In just a few words, what advice would you give to a young operator, OT, or IT person interested in transformation who's just starting out today?
So it's a great question. I was actually just talking to an employee of ours that was asking me the same thing. For me, it's about continuous learning, figuring out where you have what we call comparative advantage. You can create the most value. Go after those things that you're passionate about. Find your passion, and then most importantly is get visibility and credibility on strategic initiatives. Your work should somehow tie to some higher level strategy, so that you can get the visibility, credibility. If you're just off doing something on the side, it could be the greatest thing in the world, but it's not going to get the right investment, and you're not going to be able to get the right leaders to pay attention and say, wow, this is truly transformational, and you're executing on the strategy that I've been seeking. That if you can do that, I think that's key to success.
Tony, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me. And if anybody has any other questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on LinkedIn or any other avenue.
Is that the best place to connect with you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn will be the best.
Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it. That was great.